This is Topic 1, Lesson 1, The Distant Past. This is our first digital notebook with our lesson video, so I want to go through how to open things. You can use the e-text, which is posted under your Topic 1, Lesson 1. This is a digital textbook. You can use the textbook in front of you, or you can use this video to help you. You will need to click on Digital Notebook with Lesson Video. That is where you will find this video, and you will find the digital notebook you need for this lesson. Open your digital notebook. Once it is open, you will see it is 7 pages long. We can go ahead and look through this digital notebook. At the top, you will see, I tell you for vocabulary, use that purple PowerPoint to go ahead and get these definitions. If you want to look at the e-text, these words are on the first page of the e-text. So there are your 8 vocab words. You will then see on page 3, I tell you in the e-text, you can get this answer on the first page, and then you also need to click next one time. The e-text does not have page numbers, so instead I just tell you how many times you need to click that next button in the bottom right hand corner to get to the page that has these answers. If you are using the textbook in front of you, I have given you the page number that you will find the answer on. You may notice that these numbers are red and they are highlighted in yellow. You will see throughout my lessons that in the digital notebook, if the number is red, highlighted yellow, it means that this is a quiz question. Page 4, you'll see right here, this is for the interactive gallery. This is not in the actual textbook. The only way you can get to this is if you are in the e-text or this video. Page 5, you will see again 3 questions. Notice they are not highlighted or in red. These are not quiz questions, but I give you the page number you can find the answers on. Page 6, we'll be looking at a picture. Page 7, notice number 1 is a quiz question, but number 2 is not. Every digital notebook will have 5 quiz questions. So here's 1, and here are your other 4 to help you with your quiz. There are 8 vocab words for this lesson. You will always find the vocab words on the first few pages. For this video, I am going to use the e-text. So in the e-text right here, you'll be able to follow along if you would like to. I went ahead and split my screen. On the right, you will see my digital notebook. On the left is my Savas. Since we are starting a new topic, I am going to go ahead and play the topic video for you. I will play this in class as well from Savas rather than on this video because it's easier to see from Savas than through this video.
What I really love about the past is thinking about the human experience in the past. I think one of the most powerful things about archaeology is that it gives us insight into ways of life that work well for people, but that don't happen to exist at present. It is fundamentally about who we are as human beings. I'm Catherine Twiss. I'm an archaeologist and an associate professor at Stony Brook University on Long Island. I specialize in Southwest Asia. So right now I work in Çatalhöyük, Turkey, on the Asian side. I work in prehistory, specifically from, let's say, about 5,000 years ago to more like 10,000 years ago, normally. Key features of the Neolithic of Southwest Asia. Compared to earlier periods, you get a population boom. You get people who are relying on plants and animals that they produce themselves. They're still often hunting and gathering quite a lot, but they're relying on domesticates. They're building houses that are sometimes quite elaborate. And at Çatalhöyük, they're 2 stories, and they've got plastered walls, and you get wall paintings. You get elaborate art and other forms of symbolism. I specialize in animal bones, which means that at Çatalhöyük, what I do is I actually am not one of the people who digs on a regular basis. I'm down in the lab looking at the animal remains that come out of the ground. And what I do is I figure out what kind of animals are present, what body parts of those different animals are present, what people might have done to them. These are modern bones. They're not the bones from Çatalhöyük. Çatalhöyük animal bones stay in Turkey. So we have modern comparative specimens in Turkey that we use. So we do the exact same thing there. We have a lab set up with sheep bones, goat bones, cattle bones, donkey bones, etc., that we use to study the materials in the field. So the first thing you want to do for bone analysis is figure out which bone or tooth it is. And the great thing for this is that mammals generally have the same bones in their bodies. We all have humeri, which are the bones of the upper arm. We have a radius and an ulna, which are the bones in our lower arm. So to some extent, you're a walking cheat sheet, right? So I have this lovely bone fragment here. And that's what it looks like. And what I can do is get an animal and just look and see, do the bones match? And here the answer is clearly no. And I can just go down and look for a match. Now, as it turns out, here we have a basic match, different sides of the body, but still. Once you've figured out what bone it is, the next thing you want to figure out is what animal it comes from. And there again, it's a matter of comparing. So we have a big dog. We have a goat. We have a couple of different sizes of deer, and we have a gazelle. So you can see really clearly, dog, this is not, right? It's a different shape. This is a reasonably good match, but it's not perfect. But this one, that's a pretty good match. And so I know that this is a goat. And so what that tells me is that this is a goat, or because the bones are very similar, a sheep. So what I know now is I have the radius of a sheep or a goat. Then I can look at what shape is the bone in, what condition is it in. I can see if there are marks of cooking on them. Do they have cut marks? That one, not so much, but look at that. That is a really terrific cut mark from a modern person. And then burning in ways that might indicate it was cooked. So I can get a lot of information off of any one bone, and then I can combine that information to end up with a good idea of what people were doing with animals at the site. Greta, can you grab it for me, please? It's incredibly exciting to go to a site and to realize that you are the first person to see that, to touch that in thousands of years. To think that the last person who held this was a person whose way of life no longer exists, who was fundamentally like you, but 5, 10, 15, 50,000 years ago, that's just an incredible feeling.
All right, sorry for any of those issues we had there at the beginning. If you are in class, you won't have to suffer through that anyway because I will show the actual video. So let's go ahead and look at the e-text. I do recommend you use the textbook in front of you because the textbook is so much easier to navigate through than the e-text. All right, I have the e-text open for lesson 1. First of all, for you, if you are split screening, as some students like to do, they like to have the e-text open on one side and the digital notebook on the other. If you are doing so, you might need to get rid of this wall. On those Chromebooks, sometimes you can't see any of the writing. You'll need to click this blue arrow and it will get rid of this. It'll put it away for you, and then you'll be able to see the words like I can. Let's just look through here quick. As you are looking through, you can see that I have circled something. This, I'm just going to give you a quick peek into it. On page 3, it is because it goes with number 1. So I highlight or circle things in the e-text to help you with your answers. All right, let's go ahead and start listening to this lesson.
Lesson 1. The Distant Past. We're all interested in people, but certain people, called anthropologists, have made a science out of studying people. Anthropology is the study of how human beings behave, how they act together, where they came from, and what makes one group of people different from another. In this lesson, we will look at the work of a particular group of anthropologists known as archaeologists. Archaeologists study human life in the past by examining the things that people left behind.
All right, I'm going to pause that. On page 3 of your digital notebook, we have not gotten to the vocab yet. We will do that shortly. But on page 3, number 1, what does an archaeologist study? Again, if you're in the textbook, you can find the answer on page 7. If you're on the e-text, you will find it in this circled yellow text. Go ahead and get that answer now. All right, let's go ahead and watch the lesson video. Again, if you're in class, I will play this from Actual Savas and not from this video.
You've probably seen lots of movies about prehistoric people. Most of them pretty silly and not very accurate, even though fun to watch. What's the real story about how early humans lived? Well, forget about houses or towns. Probably you'd be living in a small group, maybe a couple of related families who were constantly moving from place to place. Sometimes you'd move because the weather changed or the hunting was bad. Often you'd go back to a place where you knew certain plants grew or there was a warm cave. What was everyday life like? Well, you mainly wanted to find food and water and a safe, warm shelter for a while. You worried about attacks by wild animals or another band of travelers. If you were a man, you mostly hunted animals for food, so it was important to keep track of where certain animals were. If you were a woman, you gathered fruits, nuts, seeds, wild honey, and anything else edible you could find. Women and younger children also hunted smaller animals or caught fish. Because of this way of life, we know the people of this time as hunter-gatherers. To survive and succeed in this way of living, hunter-gatherers developed several important new skills as time went on. One basic skill was how to fashion tools from stone. Their early tools were rough and clumsy, but they gradually improved their skill at tool making by sharpening flakes of stone into blades or arrow points. Sometimes they used hard animal parts like bones and antlers as tools. Better weapons let hunters go after bigger game, like deer or even mammoths. Because working stone was such a big step, this period is known as the Paleolithic era, which means Old Stone Age. But while making stone tools was important for survival, another new ability was perhaps even more important. Can you think of what that was? Right, fire. Using fire gave early humans new powers. It could keep them warm, offer light, and scare off dangerous animals. It allowed early humans to cook their food, especially meat and fish. Cooking made many new foods okay to eat. Most importantly, fire allowed early peoples to move to new places where they otherwise might not have been able to survive. opening up more of the world to human habitation. How do you think hunter-gatherers learned the skill of making and using fire?
All right, let's go back to where we were. Good video. So at this point, go back to page 1. You will see your 8 vocab words here at the bottom of your page 1 on your e-text. I recommend you copy and paste the definitions for all 8 words from that purple PowerPoint. Let's see. Anthropology, study of humankind in all aspects, especially development and culture. Archaeologist, scientist who studies human life in the past by examining the things that people left behind. Prehistory, time before humans invented writing. Fossil, preserved remains of ancient human, animal, or plant. Geologist, scientist who studies the physical materials of the earth itself, such as soil and rocks. Artifact, object made by a human being. Hunter-gatherer, person who lives by hunting animals and gathering plants. And lastly, culture, beliefs, customs, practices, and behavior of a particular nation or group of people. So pause this video and take some time to get these 8 vocab words defined. All right, we are going to move on. If you're using the e-text, click next one time. Again, you'll see this wall in my way. I can't even see the writing. So I'll click that to get out of it. We will go back to page 3. We've already done number 1, so we are on number 2. Let's go ahead and listen to the lesson.
Studying early humans. Until about 5,000 years ago, people had no way to write things down. To study prehistory, or the time before written records, archaeologists look for the places where people may have lived.
All right, let's pause that. Number 2, which phrase defines the time called prehistory? In this circled paragraph, you will find that answer. All right, let's continue on.
What are fossils? To learn about the earliest humans, archaeologists depend mainly on fossils. Fossils are hardened remains or imprints of living things that existed long ago. These remains may include plants, feathers, bones, and even footprints. Fossils form in several ways. For example, after a living thing dies, it may quickly become covered by sand or mud. Once covered, the soft parts of the plant or animal rot away. The harder parts, such as bones, teeth, or woody stems, last much longer. Over many years, minerals from the soil slowly replace this once living material. What remains is a rock-like copy of the original. How are ancient remains dated? Archaeologists use several methods for determining the ages of fossils and other prehistoric objects. In this work, they get valuable information from geologists, scientists who study the physical materials of Earth itself, such as soil and rocks. One dating method is to compare objects found in similar layers of rock or soil. Objects found in lower layers are generally older than those found in upper layers. Archaeologists may also compare an object with a similar fossil or artifact whose age is already known. Radioactive dating is another method for determining the age of objects up to about 50,000 years old. Living things contain radioactive elements that decay or break down over time. By measuring the radioactive material in bones and other materials that were once alive, scientists can tell when an object was formed. In recent years, scientists have developed other methods to study fossils. They use DNA to compare human remains from the past with people living today. Genetic evidence has uncovered new information about how people changed and how they moved from place to place.
All right, number 3. What are geologists able to tell archaeologists about fossils? If you look in this circled text, the circled paragraph that starts with radioactive dating, if you're in the textbook, it's on page 8. You will find that answer. Let's continue on to number 4.
Why do scientists look for artifacts? Human ancestors, called hominins, lived millions of years ago. To study prehistoric people who lived more recently, archaeologists look for old settlements, such as villages or campsites. Such sites often lie buried beneath layers of soil. Archaeologists must carefully excavate or uncover these sites to learn about the people who once lived there. As archaeologists dig up a site, they look for artifacts such as tools, pottery, or weapons. Artifacts are anything made and used by humans. These scientists then try to identify patterns, examining what artifacts are found together in the same spot. Artifacts found in an ancient campsite can help archaeologists understand how the people who once camped there hunted for food, or what they ate.
Number 4, what is an artifact? Page 9 of your textbook. It's in this circled yellow text that starts with "as archaeologists dig up a site." Go ahead and get that answer. Notice this is a quiz question. This whole page is quiz questions. All right, let's move on to the next page. Click next at the bottom right. We are going to look at this interactive gallery, piecing the past together. So after finding this skull near Lake Turkana in Kenya, anthropologists discovered the near-complete skeleton of a boy who lived about 1.8 million years ago. Bones excavated near this lake were carefully washed and labeled before being sent to the Kenya National Museum. The skeleton was named the Turkana Boy. Only an arm bone and some hand and feet bones are missing from the reconstructed skeleton. Scientists compared the skeleton to other skeletons. The boy's hips and thighs were narrow, similar to those of a long-distance runner today. His skull was moderately large, though smaller than Homo sapiens. The Turkana Boy's skeletal features have contributed to a greater understanding of the Homo ergaster species and human development. So, on page 4 of your digital notebook, what challenges do you think scientists had as they excavated and washed the bones? Let's think about how old they were. Maybe they were brittle. Go ahead and pause my video, take a minute, and get that answer. Moving on to page 5 in your digital notebook. Again, we have to remove this wall by clicking this blue arrow if you are looking at the e-text.
Where did human ancestors live? Where did human ancestors first appear on Earth? For a long time, scientists could not agree on an answer. Then, in 1960, British archaeologists Mary and Louis Leakey discovered a piece of a human-like skull at Olduvai Gorge in East Africa. The Leakeys called their find Homo habilis, handyman, because evidence showed that these early human ancestors made and used tools. Tests showed that the Homo habilis fossils were at least 1.75 million years old. From that point on, the search for the origins of humankind has largely focused on Africa.
All right, you have 2 questions here because you can see highlighted in pink is going to be number 1, highlighted in green will be number 2. So number 1, why did the Leakeys call their find Homo habilis? You'll find that answer in the pink highlighted text, and then as soon as you're done with that, move on to number 2. How old was the skull Mary and Louis Leakey found in the gorge? You'll find that answer in this green highlighted text. All right, let's continue on.
African beginnings. On November 30th, 1974, American anthropologist Donald Johanson made a discovery that helped shape how scientists view early human history. For 3 years, Johanson had been searching for evidence of human ancestors in Ethiopia, a country in East Africa. Johanson later recalled, primary source. On this November morning, it was about noon. I was heading back to my Land Rover to drive back to camp, and I happened to look over my right shoulder, and as I did so, I saw a fragment of a bone which I recognized as coming from the elbow region in a skeleton. There was a piece of a leg. There was a piece of a pelvis. There was a piece of a jaw. There was a piece of a skull. And I realized almost instantaneously that we had part of a skeleton. Donald C. Johanson, Academy of Achievement Interview, 1991. After 2 weeks of careful searching, Johanson and his team had uncovered hundreds of pieces of bone. They decided that all the bones belonged to one individual because they did not find two examples of any one type of bone. They determined that she was a 3.5-foot tall female. Johanson named her Lucy, after a song by the Beatles. Johanson's team found some 40% of Lucy's skeleton. The bones of her legs, pelvis, ankle, and spine suggest that, like us, she walked upright on two legs. However, she lived 3.2 million years ago. Since then, even older fossils have been found in Africa. In 1992, American anthropologist Tim White found remains of hominins who lived in Ethiopia at least 4.4 million years ago. Beginning with a single tooth, White's team uncovered more fragments. Finally, in 2009, White unveiled a nearly complete skeleton of a female that he named Artie. More than 1 million years older than Lucy, Artie was taller and heavier. She probably walked upright, but slowly and awkwardly. What is the oldest one? Many scientists believe that the oldest humans began to develop or evolve from their great ape cousins about 5 to 7 million years ago. This process is what's known as evolution. Discoveries such as Lucy and Artie have also led most scientists to conclude that humankind began in East Africa about 4.5 million years ago. French scientist Michael Brunet is one of a group of scientists that believes that human life started elsewhere in Africa. In 2001, Brunet found a human-like skull in the country of Chad. Tests showed the skull to be nearly 7 million years old. That makes it, says Brunet, the oldest one. Brunet's discovery has raised questions. Chad is in Central Africa. Did humankind begin there rather than in East Africa? The skull Brunet found is older than other human fossils discovered so far. Is humankind older than scientists once thought? Scientists will continue to look for answers to questions like these. Meanwhile, the search continues. This is the beginning of the story, says Brunet of his work in Chad. Just the beginning.
Number 3, why do most scientists believe that human life began in Africa? In the e-text, it's right here in the video. It's the first 2 paragraphs after what is the oldest one. If you're in the textbook, you're on page 10. Again, same heading. These 2 paragraphs, you will find this answer. All right, let's move on to page 6 in your digital notebook. Again, removing this ball that is covering my words. You have to wait for those highlights and annotations to be done. All right, let's continue on.
How did hunter-gatherers live? Early humans were hunter-gatherers, which means that they lived by hunting small animals and gathering plants. They also probably scavenged for food left by predators. They formed societies and developed ways to improve their chances for survival.
Number 1, which describes a way that early hunter-gatherers got food. This is on page 11 in your textbook. It is in this circled, highlighted text that was just read to you under How Did Hunter-Gatherers Live? Notice this is a quiz question. All right, let's continue on.
Archaeologists know very little about how early hunter-gatherers such as Lucy lived, but they do know that their lives were often harsh. Many groups appeared for a time and died out. To survive and grow, early humans developed technology, tools, and skills to meet their needs.
All right, let's look at this painting. The painting of the bull found in a cave in Lascaux, France. How do you think ancient artists chose which objects or animals to paint? Why did they paint this bull? We're looking at the picture at the top of page 11. Why do you think they painted this bull? This is an opinion question. Go ahead and get that now.
How were the first tools made? About 2.5 million years ago, early humans learned how to make tools out of stone. This technology was so important to human survival that archaeologists call this period the Paleolithic era, or the Old Stone Age. The Paleolithic era ended about 2,500 to 10,000 years ago. Over time, tool makers become more skillful, making thinner and sharper stone blades. Some blades were used to tip spears and arrows. Tool makers also began making weapons from bones and antlers. As their skills and weapons improved, Paleolithic hunters were able to turn from hunting small animals to hunting larger animals, such as deer. How did fire affect human development? Around 800,000 years ago, people also learned how to use fire. With fire, people could have light on dark nights, cook meat and plants, and use flames to aid in hunting and to scare off dangerous animals. Making fire also had important long-term effects, such as enabling people to live in places where it otherwise would have been too cold for people to survive. Here, a British archaeologist explains why learning to control fire was an important step in human development. Primary source. The control of fire was presumably the first great step in man's freedom from the bondage of his environment. Mankind is no longer restricted in his movement to a limited range of climates, and his activities need not be entirely determined by the sun's light. But in mastery of fire, man was controlling a mighty physical force. V. Jordan Child, Man Makes Himself. What was life like for hunter-gatherers? Culture includes the many different elements that make up the way of life of a people. These include social and family organization, beliefs and values, technology, shelter and clothing, common activities, storytelling, rituals, and art. Stone Age hunter-gatherers lived in small groups or bands. After gathering as much food as they could in one area, they moved on. They built temporary huts out of branches or made tents of animal skins. Bands stayed small so they could move easily. A typical band included 10 or 12 adults and their children. Men generally did the hunting, but they also gathered other food. Women usually gathered fruit, grains, seeds, nuts, eggs, and honey. They caught small animals and may have picked herbs for medicine.
Sorry, we went to page 7 here. So page 7, number 3, why is the Paleolithic era named for stone? You will find the answer in this first pink highlighted paragraph. It is on page 11 in your textbook, and it is under the how were the first tools made. Get that answer, and then this digital notebook is complete.